Ooh, what a beautiful question. I feel like I just want to tap into the divine to answer it. It's so exciting that our internal world creates our reality.
Yeah.
And that's like the fun play on manifesting. So it all comes down to your frame of reference. It has nothing to do with what's actually around you.
That was Shanna in Address discussing Our Day Begins, inspired by Psalm 59. I'm Shep Rosenman. This is The Rest is Commentary, where we discuss what songs inspired by the Psalms inspire in my guests. Shanna is a singer-songwriter known for her quirky folk pop music, witty lyrics, and engaging stage presence. Her songs offer a blend of humor and heartbreak and candor. Shanna won multiple songwriting competitions, including the Rocky Mountain Folks Festival Songwriting Contest in 2023 and the Kerrville New Folk Competition in 2020. Shanna and I met at Song School, which is connected to Folks Festival, and I, and many others, gravitate to Shanna not only for her talent as a songwriter, her quick smile, but her openness and excitement as a master educator. Shanna's debut album, Robot, was released in May 2022. You can find her music on all streaming platforms and on her website, www.shanna, that's SHANNA, inaddress.com. We discuss the difference between writing from the head and writing from the heart, how you respond when someone lets you down, ways to move out of sadness, music as a vehicle for connecting to the divine, the idea of manifesting things into happening, listening to your body and spending time in nature as both secular and Hasidic practices, Byron Katie and reality's kindness, October 7th as a limitation on the notion of reality's kindness, and so much more. Let's start off by listening to Our Day Begins.
I hear the gurgle and whoosh first, then I smell the caffeine calling to me, calling to me. Should get up any minute now. The room pulsates with the silence, except for her rhythmic breathing. The brushed nickel fans, velvet dancing, endless, unaware, entrancing. And our day begins, our daily routine. The sun whispers day begins, and our day begins, our daily routine. The sun whispers day begins. Not a prisoner, yet here I am, still in orange pajamas, until she rips the pillow off her head. And in one swift motion jumps out of bed. The room pulsates with the silence, except for her rhythmic breathing. The brushed nickel fans, velvet dancing, endless, unaware, entrancing, and our day begins, our daily routine. The sun whispers, day begins, and our day begins, our daily routine. The sun whispers, day begins.
Hi, it's so good to see you, Shanna.
I'm happy.
Good. We love it. You always exude happiness, even in the most twisty yoga poses.
It's true. Twisty yoga poses make me happier even.
Yeah, I hear that. Just to give everyone else some context, Shanna is one of my many mentors from the song school world. I have a few faves, and Shanna really is at the top of that list. In the Jewish world, we would say you're one of my rabbis, because rabbi literally means my teacher. So you are one of my rebbeim, and I am a rabbi collector. So rebbeim is the plural of rabbi. And I'm giving you that context because you and I both know that you are not Jewish, even though you're in this somewhat seemingly Jewish podcast. And I say seemingly Jewish because the Psalms doesn't have to be a religious experience. They're there for everybody, and you get what you get, regardless of your religion, regardless of whether you believe in God or not. To me, they speak to the human condition in so many, many ways, and that's why I'm writing this song cycle. And I really hope that from the Jewish particular, we can get to the universal human truths, regardless of the fact that it's coming from my Jewish brain. So I'm going to ask you one question. Here's the question. My view of the creative process is that we are tapping into what some people will call the zeitgeist, others will call the muse, some others will call angels or God or whatever, but there's some brain waves that we connect to, and it's our job as musicians and poets and artists and filmmakers to try to express whatever that which is greater than ourselves is putting out there. And, if we don't tap into it, well, okay, somebody else will. And if we tap into it in a not great way, someone else is going to get the same thing and tap it into it in a way that moves more people. That's my theory anyway. And I receive each one of those as a gift. In that same spirit, I offer that gift to my friends and mentors in hopes that the song inspires something in them. I don't really care what it is, but hopefully it's questions or commentary or curiosity. So what questions, commentary, or curiosity did One Day Begins evoke in you?
I'm going to start with my simple, stupid questions, which were, first of all, who is she?
Who do you think she is?
Your wife.
I think that's so in Jewish learning, there are levels of learning. There's the pshat, which is the simple understanding. And I think I wrote this song from the simple understanding. And, the question is, do you get to the next level, remez, which is hinted at, drash, a learning from it, or sod, the hidden, deep, mystical, Kabbalistic stuff? I'm not sure, which is why I find the question itself fascinating. Do you think it works on any other level, or must it be my wife?
A feminine pronoun for God.
So the beautiful thing about Judaism is that God is non-binary for us. Hebrew's a gendered language, and we have masculine names for God and feminine names for God. And a lot of my other songs, I'm very, very intentional in trying to make the song work on a level where it's Shari, my wife, whom you've met, but also, and not only because I think she's divine, but it's also God or that which is greater than ourselves. And in theory, she'll get up any minute now. Am I waiting for God to wake up? Well, maybe. Am I waiting for God to come to me in poetry form or lyric form? Maybe it's God, but I think more likely it's God in the form of my wife or any lover, regardless of gender.
Yeah, I love that. And I also I love how the song starts. Just the vividness of the words that you choose is beautiful. The gurgle and the whoosh. And you could smell the coffee, but you don't. You smell the caffeine. I was like, I don't even know the smell of caffeine, like the literal molecule. I like that. And the room pulsates with the silence. Like your poetic tendencies are just up front and center in this beautiful piece. Let me ask another question, even though you said one question. What did you mean by not a prisoner, yet here I am, still in orange pajamas?
Okay, so the speaker is still in bed. Now, so the original lyric, I think, was waiting. Yeah, waiting in orange pajamas. I moved it to still because it's a double entendre. Still as in I am still, and still because I'm not moving. And that kind of, for me, is where the prisoner thing comes in. Like, I just don't want to wake my wife when she's sleeping, so I stay in bed. I could get on with my day. I could go downstairs and go to the studio and leave her alone, but I also don't want to leave her. So sometimes I'll just stay in bed and listen to her breathe. And sometimes I'll stay in bed and read emails and respond to them, but super slowly, super quietly, so I don't wake her.
What is your daily routine?
I have a variety of daily routines. Like I cycle in and out of them, but I always start the day, after going through the physical brushing my teeth and all of that. It depends, honestly, what's happening with Shari. If she's up and about, then I will dive into my journaling, my stretching, praying.
Journaling and stretching sounds so much better than my touring habit of waking up and playing Wordle for 45 minutes.
Some songs, as you know, will take 15 drafts till you get it, quote, right. And others, it's pretty much there from your stream of consciousness. This was one of those. I after last year's song school, for a month, I was like, can I do this? And I did a song a day, and this is one of those.
And what I really appreciate is it feels meditative and short. And it's so hard for songwriters to write short songs. So I can anchor to it really easily. And I wouldn't say, I'm like, no, don't add anything to it. It's perfect.
Thank you.
It feels like a meditation in a song form, which I love.
Yeah, me too. I really try to honor the instinct of what does the song want? And sometimes, in my other lives, I will sometimes overcomplicate things. And I do that in songwriting too, but I try very hard. So I want to turn the tables a little bit. I've listened to all of your music thousands of times. I've watched your videos. I've even probably watched, in fact, I think I'm pretty sure I did this. I watched the story behind the song videos that you do. So I think I did that for Robot. And I remember my jaw dropping, this woman is all heart. How is she saying she's too clinical and logical? And then I'll circle back to where I was going with this. But can you comment on that for a beat?
Yeah. Well, it really comes from comparing myself to people whose emotions live on the surface. Right? Being at song school, I have friends that cry every day. And I'm always like, why are you crying? I have I'm not judging them, even though the tone of voice that just came out of my mouth was super judgmental. But that feeling of like, that was beautiful, it just made me cry is pretty foreign to me. And I also am consistently in life having to search for the compassion for when people are suffering because of random relationship hardships, because I just, I really feel like I don't. Like
Mm.
this resilience complex that reframes something instantly of just like, oh, that person's going through a tough time, so they lashed out, is like happens pretty quickly for me. And so I'm rarely like just really wrestling with the tough emotions that are human.
Mm.
And so while I agree with you of like, yes, I am all heart, I have so much love for people. It's like, I don't know. I feel like, am I missing out on the breadth and depth of the human experience because I'm so quick to bounce back from hard things?
Hmm. Well, I think it's fascinating what you're saying because on the one hand, you're suggesting a lack, but on the other hand, you're using the language of bouncing back. And once you acknowledge that there's a bounce back, that means you've experienced it, but perhaps not to the depth or duration that someone else does. And I don't know that that's a lack. It may be a gift, because you can still tap into the emotion, but you don't need to live in it.
Yeah, I do think that's part of the gift of being a songwriter is being able to look curiously at things.
What do you do when you're sad? Like, how do you unsad, or do you kind of in it and let it go naturally?
Let's see. Vent to a friend. That's like the easiest, the fastest way to get out. Or exercise. It's the magical tool. I've been spending a year learning coaching skills to really help people and myself access the deep inner work that it takes to transform limiting beliefs and stories.
It's very Hasidic. I mean, I don't know how much you know about the Hasidic world, but they're Kabbalists, they're they're like, whereas the kind of traditional non-Hasidic called mitnagdim or yeshivish people, they're all about the law. The Hasidic world is about connecting to God through either a broken heart or to connecting to God through joy. And there are different flavors, and some flavors of Hasidic communities have both, and some it's one way or the other. Like I grew up I have deep Hasidic background on both sides of my family. On my father's side, they're from Russia, and their form of prayer has two basic flavors: screaming and singing. And my forebears were the ones who would travel from Stalin in Russia by foot to Jerusalem to communicate that year's set of music.
Wow.
So it's a very weighty tradition, and it honors the idea that music somehow connects to the divine in a way that the recitation of words doesn't. Well, so let me ask you this, and I know this. So with a brief introduction, it's a two-part question. One, can you tell us a little bit about what I've had the pleasure of learning with you before, a little bit about manifesting? Like, how does that kind of come out in your music and the rest of your life? A. And B, and this is really the spiritual question, is to what extent is a version of God, it can be the old white man and the white beard and the white sandals and the white robes, or it can be the community or something else. To what extent does that which is greater than ourselves play a part of this manifesting philosophy?
What a beautiful question. I feel like I just want to tap into the divine to answer it. It's so exciting that our internal world creates our reality.
Yeah.
And that's like the fun play on manifesting. So it all comes down to your frame of reference. It has nothing to do with what's actually around you. To when it comes to how much gratitude am I able to access? How much appreciation do I have for the life that is around
That's beautiful. The Jewish perspective, so we pray 3 times a day, and we have all sorts of blessings that we say throughout the day. And in these prayers, like there's a whole arc to it. You start by kind of gratitude, thanks God for giving me new clothes, for letting the rooster be wise and tell me when to wake up, and then, we remind ourselves that our forebears offered sacrifices. And then we remind ourselves that Rabbi Yishmael articulated 13 hermeneutical principles with which to analyze biblical text. And like, it's kind of a crazy prayer, but if you are a studier, it's a quick refresher. Here are the 13 hermeneutical, I'm sure I'm butchering the pronunciation, hermeneutical principles. And so now when you dive into these prayers, you're subconsciously analyzing them through Rabbi Yishmael's rubric. And it doesn't have to simply be a mumble. It can be an analysis, and you can do a deep dive into a prayer. And where are you going? You're going into praising God, and then you're going into accepting the yoke of heaven. And then you have this one-on-one encounter with God where you make all sorts of requests. And now I'm coming back to my point. One of those prayers, or a series of those prayers, are about getting back Jerusalem, the Messiah coming, the ingathering of the exiled, and all of these things happen when the Messiah arrives. The language of the prayer is, please God, do this, rather than, God, this has happened. So I wonder if there's a rewrite to these prayers that's in manifestation language that would, for 2,000 years, the Jews were waiting to go back to the land of Israel in a full and complete way in peace with our neighbors. It's more than 2,000 years. But if we rewrote these prayers as manifesting it, would the Messiah actually be here because some of the language of the rabbis is the Messiah is waiting out just outside the city gates. Mm-hmm. Right? So it's there, but it's not the language of prayer.
In every religious text, isn't there some semblance of pray and then believe?
Yeah.
That's manifestation.
I think the difference, as I understand what you're saying, though, is, look, I've read Thich Nhat Hanh. I've read a variety of other pastors on Henry Nguyen. I love his writing. All of those prayers that they're articulating are somewhat conditioned. It's, I'm asking for this to happen and believe it will happen, but it hasn't happened yet. The left-hand turn that's fascinating to me is part of the manifestation process is it's happened. And I'm choosing to believe that, not that it will happen. There's no condition. It's the condition's been satisfied already.
I'm really fascinated with decisions and intuition. I came to what has been a very settling thing for me, which could be summarized in this story, which is that a friend from Colorado who's thinking of moving to Nashville texted me and said, Shanna, how did you know it was the right decision to move to Nashville? And I didn't think long and hard about it. I just responded. I said, because I chose it. and I always right.
Right. Well, this reminds me of something my mother used to say. May she rest in peace. And she would have loved you. She'll like when she, with the people she loved, she'd say, come sit by me, and she'd hold your hand. And that's a whole other episode because I wrote a song that includes that. She was famous for saying this: I may not always be right, but I'm never wrong. And it was usually in the context of, if your father says X and I say Y, he's not going to tell me I'm wrong. But the thing is, she was always right. She had very good instincts. And there are people like that in the world. Like, I think I have good instincts, but, I've gone through a very interesting transformation in my songwriting worldview. Like, I'm a brain first. Like, I'm a thinker. I study Talmud. I read contracts. I studied English literature. But what I've learned in recent years is that the songwriting thing is how I access my emotions. And it takes, like, whether it's a melody or partial phrase or a song idea, that's not coming from here. It's coming from my heart opening up to the muses, God, and just saying, okay, what do I have to contribute, or what do you want me to contribute? And so it's this interplay, yin and yang. It's the interplay between brain and heart. The brain inevitably kicks in. We're self-critical, we're self-judgmental. But for me, I've learned that it's second. Most of the time, sometimes I'm like, okay, I want to write this. And that's coming from the brain. And like, I'm doing on Psalm 100, I believe. It opens with some language about God having faith in humanity, which made me think of humanity's faith in God. And so I was like, oh, that reminds me of Maimonides, who's a 12th century Spanish and Egyptian scholar, 13 principles of faith. It's become a bit of a credo, but it's not really, because we don't have credos. And I was like, oh, let me take a look at that and see what I do and don't believe. And I was like, oh my God, this would be perfect for a spoken word piece.
Ooh, I want to hear that.
I corralled my old bass player in my band that I played in the 90s called Blithering Heights, because we were all very tall, and asked him to collaborate with me. So like that night, he sends me a bass groove, and I then spent like a week working out some guitar parts. And then I was like, okay, now that I roughly know what the music is, I need to dive into the lyrics. And I went through like 13 iterations of that. My first version of it was 24 minutes long when I just like timed it on my iPhone. But I've gotten it down to like 8 minutes.
Oh my gosh. That sounds epic. And I just wanted to comment on the head versus the heart thing. I think it's a really beautiful distinction to like walk through life of like, am I living from my head right now, or am I living from my heart? And moving from someone who's so head led and such an information junkie to just like releasing all control and opening up your heart. And I feel like that's when the decisions come to us quickly. The songwriting lyrics come to us quickly. Like everything just works when you start living from your heart, or listening to your body is another way I say it. I think like that's how the divine kind of communicates with us, not through our thoughts.
Well, that also ties back to all things can be solved with 15-minute walk or a 10-minute walk. And there was again, I keep mentioning Hasidic stuff because that's my background, but a variety of Hasidic rabbis would have the practice of going for a walk, specifically in nature. And some of them would just walk, and some of them would go there to do hitbodedut, connecting with the divine, and others would go for dveikut, gluing themselves. Hitbodedut means aloneness, sorry. Hitbodedut, dveikut would be cleaving to God. And others would go and they would go to scream at God, just express their pain. But it's all the same thing. It's connecting to that which is greater than yourself, which I'm using the God language. And you, I think, have been using the language of divinity. Maybe there's a difference. Maybe there isn't. I don't know. I don't know that I care.
Mine is God. Fine. I can say God.
Yeah. Did you grow up in a religious household?
Yeah, I grew up Catholic.
Are you still affiliated with the Catholic Church at all?
I wouldn't say so, but I don't have the same anti-Catholic, I don't know, anger.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The Catholic Church has made some very, very interesting moves in the last 20 or 30 years. I mean, they started making some interesting moves at Vatican II in the 60s, but now there's all sorts of uber kind of liberal. I'm going to say liberal rather than progressive, because some of it's progressive, but it's all very liberal moves seeking to be more inclusive and more understanding. And I think that can only be good for the world.
Yeah.
Are you comfortable answering if you're part of a religious community now, or if it's just more spiritual on a personal level?
It's definitely spiritual and personal. I would love to find, honestly, a spiritual community, because I think there's nothing more fascinating than seeing how divinity works in every individual's life. And I still feel like it's sad when I meet someone where it's not a part of theirs. Where like, oh, wow, you really think it's just what you can see, smell, touch, huh? Wow. Like, you're missing out on so much of the mystery and the magic and the path.
Yeah. And look, that's a choice too. You say, I chose to go there and therefore it's right. And belief is a choice. Non-belief is a choice. There's Pascal's wager. Do you know this one? So the philosopher Pascal basically, if I'm getting this right, basically said, there might be a God, there might not, but when I go to when I'm no longer on this plane, if there's no God, well, I don't really lose anything by kind of engaging in spiritual matters and religious observance and community. On the other hand, if there is a God and I don't, well, that's going to hurt. So I'm going to bet on choosing to believe in God, even if that belief is somewhat tenuous. And that's, by the way, like I grew up with the white-bearded, white-cloaked, white-sandaled God on a throne. Though my parents came from a Hasidic community, by the time I was born, they were very modern. Like when my parents arrived in New York, my grandfather cut my dad's payas, which was a metaphor for change. It didn't kick God out of the picture because they also went to the Degel, a pan-Hasidic synagogue in Brownsville or Williamsburg, wherever they were living at the time. And so as a result, when my parents, by the time they had me, they were less religious. And then, my mother put her foot down and said, you're either observing Shabbat, Morris, or you're not. So you can't go into the store anymore and cover up the windows with paper so no one sees you. What do you want to do? And my parents chose observance, even though my mother didn't really, it's not clear to me that she believed in God. She believed in something, but it's not so clear. And for me, all these years later, I wish I had this language when I was a young person to really explicate this with her. Because in Jewish theology, God is not defined. And I talk about this with my friend and mentor, another one of my rabbis, David Kasher. When God is asked, what should we call you? God says, Ehyeh asher ehyeh, which means literally, I will be what I will be, which is a total non-answer on the one hand. And it is an answer in that, well, you want to call me by something? Know me. If you want to know me, you have to understand that, I am whatever it is that I will be, and I, as God, am all-powerful and ever-changing. And I love the language one of my other rabbis, Rabbi Sharon Brous, uses, which is, God is always in the process of becoming.
Wow.
And I think that that's true for us too, if we allow ourselves. And that, again, ties back to manifestation.
Yeah, it does. Are you familiar with Byron Katie's work?
Sure.
I just finished one of her books, like a really old one from 2007 called A Thousand Names for Joy.
Mm,
And I just love her perspective on God because for her, God is what is. So the is some verbiage she'll use, and the is reality. And
mm,
and reality is always kind.
mm.
That is the part that I'm like, oh, can you say that objectively? Can you really say reality is kind? And her explanation is that reality is always kinder than the stories we make up.
I see.
So
Yeah.
humans are attaching meaning to reality that makes us suffer
Right.
all throughout the day when those meanings that we're attaching are all made up, even the good ones. Even me making up the fact that no one actually stole my wallet, it's now appeared. Like that is a made up meaning, but it brings me joy. And if it brings
Yeah.
me joy, I am okay with it.
Right. And in that sense, I see how reality is kind. I mean, so I'm going to mention our mutual friend, Terry Delaney. I'm not a big crier at song school, but whenever I go to undefended songwriting, I inevitably am bawling my eyes out.
So I better go. It'll crack me.
Amy Speece has also, like, I've watched other people open up, and that is so moving that I'll get teary eyed. So Terry was, she's a trauma therapist, and someone was like being hard on themselves, like, and the impulse, and then in the wake of that, they're like, well, I know I'm not supposed to say that, right? So there's this twin concept of be hard on yourself, be gentle with yourself. And it evoked a conversation with Terry about how important it is in the context of trauma to acknowledge the trauma and be gentle with it. Like, you can't just do the gentle, you have to do the work of acknowledging the trauma. And that's where the kindness, reality is kinder than we experience it to be. Like, you can't get past the fact that God knows how many people were murdered. I don't know what the final number is on October 7th. And several hundred of them were kidnapped on October 7th. You can't get past that. You also can't get past the fact that Palestinians are losing their lives in Gaza. But you have two choices, at least, on the move to make there. There's the choice that my sister and ultra-Orthodox people, whom I love dearly, these are people who are close to me in my life, like, they will choose to ignore the fact that Palestinians are losing their lives. It's not important because that's what's required in order to save Jewish lives. It's a binary zero-sum game. Like, you have to do this. And on the flip side of it, and I've had this experience directly with some Palestinian, totally was not expecting to talk about this, with Palestinian protesters who, for them, just because I am a supporter of the state of Israel, even if I don't want there to be the loss of innocent civilian Palestinian life, and there's a lot to unpack there, they won't talk to me, because talking to me, if you will, manifests a Jewish Zionist reality that they are not prepared to do. And in the process of doing so, that's that hard rock song I sang you. I don't know if you got a chance to watch or listen to it. That's what it's all about. It was that experience where they just didn't treat us like human beings. And so long as you have those two poles, including my sister, whom I love dearly, and this group of people, and the terrorists themselves are worse, there's no chance for a kinder reality because it can only be this heavy-handed, brutal reality that they are opting for, which is why the idea to me of choosing a kinder reality is something that automatically puts you into conversation of engaging with someone else because you're kinder.
Yeah, what a great example.
Wow, 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 wow.
I'm so curious about your intellectual journey and your spiritual journey and everything that you've manifested in your life. And we should just talk again.
I would love that, Shanna. I really would. You're an amazing songwriter, an amazing human being who has such a positive influence on the people around her, including all of your song school fans and friends. But I really feel privileged that you spent the time and did this with me. Thank you so much.
Well, this was delightful, Shep. I thought I was going to fail the Hebrew test and have to know what was happening in the psalm that inspired the song. And I was like, I don't know squat.
It's okay. You manifested another reality, a kinder one.
Yes, because I chose it.
Thanks so much for listening. Special thanks to Shanna and Address for joining me today. Thanks to Devin Schwartz and E. Rose for their help in producing this episode, and to Jessica Chana Swedler for her help on social media. You can find Our Day Begins and all of the other songs in this song cycle on most platforms that stream or download music, including Spotify and Apple. In the next episode of The Rest is Commentary, I will be talking with my friend, singer, songwriter, author, corporate consultant, and so many more things, as well as simply being another all-around inspirational human, Peter Himmelman. We're going to talk about God, relationships, and the importance of community, the impact of meeting the Lubavitcher Rebbe, restraint and commitment in relationships, the potential for greatness in every individual, creativity, humility, self-reflection, and the power of connection, dream states as pathways to creation, and so much more. Please join us.